There is a contract, signed in silence, written in a language you never learned, yet somehow follow. A contract made in childhood rooms, in moments of fear, in places where tenderness and uncertainty met. A contract that tells you who you must be to stay safe. Be agreeable, be invisible, be perfect, be strong, be small. Old rules, still obeyed, long after the world has changed. This is the hidden contract. There is a story about a stonecutter who worked alone in a mountain quarry. He shaped enormous blocks of marble for temples he would never see completed. His work was repetitive, slow, monastic. He polished even the surfaces that would be buried inside the walls, places no one would ever see. When asked why he poured care into the invisible portions of the stone, he said, "Because those parts hold the weight of everything else." Psychologists later used this story to describe the foundations of identity, not the visible behaviors, but the concealed agreements that keep our inner structures standing. We shape our surfaces to be seen, but it is the hidden contract beneath them that determines our form. Every contract begins as an attempt to bear weight. A hidden contract forms long before awareness. It forms in reactions, in the tightening of breath when a voice sharpens. It forms in the way your gaze drops to avoid becoming a target, in the way your body softens to make others comfortable. Before you understand language, you understand danger. Before you understand identity, you understand adaptation. The nervous system makes a promise. If I do this, I will be safe. So the shaping begins, instinctive, immediate, protective. You become agreeable to prevent conflict. You become useful to stay wanted. You become quiet to stay invisible. You become perfect to avoid rejection. These were never flaws. They were brilliant solutions to unbearable moments. But solutions solidify, and what once protected you becomes the boundary of your becoming. The contract becomes invisible through repetition. What you do to survive once, you do again to feel consistent, and again to feel stable. Eventually, the pattern becomes identity. The old world becomes the lens through which you see the new one. You bring childhood strategies into adult spaces. You carry old fears into new relationships. You assume old contracts still apply. When someone asks what you want, you hesitate, as if desire itself violates a rule you don't remember writing. When someone offers help, you withdraw, as if accepting care were a breach of your internal agreement. When an opportunity appears, you stall, as if visibility threatens the walls you once built to stay safe. The contract persists not because it is true, but because it is familiar. Hidden contracts are expensive. They cost authenticity. They cost expansion. They cost presence. You may feel guilt when you take up space, a subtle shame when you rest, a tightening in the belly when you speak your boundaries. Safety becomes intertwined with self-erasure. The body believes, if I stay small, I stay safe. If I stay quiet, I stay loved. If I stay strong, I stay untouched. But the price is steep. You lose the parts of yourself that were never meant to be hidden. Safety purchased with self-abandonment slowly becomes suffering. Every contract reinforces itself. If your contract says, stay small to stay accepted, you shrink, and others assume you prefer it. If your contract says, stay strong to stay safe, you carry everything, and others believe you need nothing. If your contract says, stay perfect to be worthy, perform, and the world rewards the effort, not knowing it is costing you peace. Contract becomes its own evidence, its own justification, its own momentum. What repeats begins to feel like truth. Before the mind knows the contract, the body enforces it. A chest that tightens when you try to say no. A stomach that drops when disappointment appears. A throat that closes when you try to speak your truth. The body remembers what the mind has normalized. It remembers the silence. It remembers the sharp edges. It remembers the moments when being small kept you safe. This is why growth feels dangerous. The body reacts as though the past were still present. To change the contract, you must speak to the body in its own language. Slowness, breath, tiny acts of safety repeated over time. The contract loosens when the body learns it no longer needs to brace. A child grows up measuring the emotional weather of a room. They learn to anticipate storms, to soften their presence, to stay attuned. As an adult, they listen beautifully. They hold others with grace. But their own needs become faint, a quiet echo behind everyone else's voice. Their contract says, "If I am enough for others, I will not be left." Yet inside, there is a loneliness that has learned to hide. A child discovers that success calms the room, that being exceptional makes them safe. They grow into a high performer, polished and steady, reliable under pressure. But rest feels alien. Joy feels conditional. Stillness feels like a risk. Their contract says, excellence is the cost of belonging. Inside, the heart beats with a quiet exhaustion. A child who feels too intense, too emotional, too much, learns to dim the light. They become soft, careful, delicate with their presence. As an adult, they move like calm air, always pleasant, rarely disruptive. But inside, unspoken truth gathers. Emotion condenses. A storm builds behind the polite horizon. Their contract says, do not disturb the world. Yet the self aches to land. There is a moment in every inner life when the contract begins to feel tight, as if the walls have quietly moved inward, as if the air has thinned, as if the shape you learned no longer matches the shape you are becoming. You notice it in the mismatch between your reflexes and your reality. You notice it when you feel drawn toward a fuller life and simultaneously held back by an older logic. You notice it when your desires grow louder than your fear. Awakening does not begin with rebellion. It begins with recognition, seeing the contract without shaming it, seeing the fear without obeying it, seeing the younger self who wrote it, and understanding why they had to. Compassion becomes the first undoing. Tenderness becomes the first freedom. The contract does not break all at once. It loosens in small, nearly invisible ways. A truth slips out, quieter than a whisper, but louder than the rule that once forbade it. A boundary forms, tentative, thin, yet unmistakably new. A longing rises, not to be good or small or perfect, but to be real. It is in these moments that the contract begins to crack, not because you force it, but because who you are becoming no longer fits inside who you are told to be. Growth presses outward, truth presses upward. Your inner landscape shifts, and the old rules cannot hold. These are not ruptures. They are openings, invitations, signs that another way of living is quietly approaching. Rewriting the contract is not dramatic. It is slow work, gentle work, often invisible from the outside. It begins with noticing the moment your body braces, the moment your voice shrinks, the moment your truth retreats. It continues when you pause long enough to ask, Is this fear from today or from another lifetime within me? Awareness creates space, and in that space, choice appears. So you try something small, a deeper breath, a slower answer, a boundary spoken with shaking hands. You let yourself rest 5 minutes longer than the contract allows. You let yourself admit you are tired. You let yourself want what you truly want, not what the contract permits you to want. These tiny shifts accumulate. They teach the body that the world has changed. They teach the mind that safety can come from truth, not performance. And gradually, so gradually, a new contract forms. Pause. Feel the impulse. Ask softly, what fear is shaping me right now? Let the answer rise without judgment. Follow the feeling back to its beginning, not to reopen pain, but to understand why the rule formed. Understanding loosens obedience. A single honest breath, a single honest boundary, a single honest truth. Let the body learn safety, slowly. The hidden contract is not your failure. It is your history. A story written by a younger self who tried to keep you alive with the tools they had. But life moves forward, and the self evolves. And there comes a moment when the old promises no longer match the person you have become. You feel it in the soft ache for authenticity, in the longing to inhabit your life fully, in the quiet truth that rises despite fear. This is the sign, the permission, the opening. You are allowed to rewrite the contract. You are allowed to choose something truer. You are allowed to become someone your younger self never knew was possible. And as the old agreement dissolves, not violently, but gently, like mist lifting from morning air, what remains is space. Space for breath. Space for truth. Space for a life that fits the size of your